This is the second lecture on species. So let me just remind you the definition of species and the various generating functions that are associated to species. So firstly, maybe I'll use a thicker pen. So species is a functor f from fb to f set. And FB is the category whose objects are finite sets and whose arrows are bijections. And F set is the category whose objects are finite sets and arrows are usual functions. Satish was just pointing out that equivalently you can take it as a functor from FB to FP, because any case you have a functor from FB to F set, its image lies in FB. So F of sigma, as we saw last time, is going to be a bijection. So because f of sigma inverse is f of sigma inverse. So we can take it also to be from FP to FP. And we had three generating functions associated to the species. The first was the exponential generating function of the species. So that is Fn. So this Fn means that the species applied to the set 1 to n, the functor applied to the set 1 to n, divided by n factorial x to the power n. This is the exponential generating function. Then there's this thing called the type generating function, which is, let's just write n greater than or equal to 0. And then we have the Sn orbits on Fn. So it's basically we're saying isomorphism classes of F structures on n. And the third is the cycle index generating function. So this is a generating function in infinitely many variables, and it's given by 1 over n factorial. Sigma belongs to Fn, Fn sigma, x1 raised to m1, x2 raised to m2, where these things equals number of I cycles in sigma. And I want to add a fourth one, which is called the Frobenius characteristic generating function of f. And this is basically the Frobenius characteristic sum n greater than or equal to 0, the Frobenius characteristic of Fn. Maybe I should say Fn, where you take this. And I need to remind you what this is. So recall that given a representation rho v of Sn, its Frobenius characteristic is defined to be symmetric function 1 over n factorial summation w belongs to Sn, trace of w on v, and then we have product pi raised to mi, where once again mi denotes the number of I cycles in m. So this looks a bit like what we get when we talk about. So when we look at permutation representation, so we are looking at CFN. Then this trace is just the number of fixed points. So this Frobenius characteristic generating function, this is and then we can write and then we have Fn sigma, and so that's just the trace, the number of fixed points is the trace, and then we have p1 raised to m1, p2 raised to m2. So in other words, this is ZF, where you substitute p1 P2, and so on. It's also, so the point I want to emphasize here is that these two generating functions carry the same amount of information. I already explained to you that you can get the Frobenius characteristic generating function from the cycle index generating function by substituting pi for xi. But you can go the other way around also, because p1, p2, p3 are all algebraically independent. So if you want the coefficient of, so all the monomials in the coefficients for all the monomials in the cycle index generating function are the coefficients of the monomials in P1, P2, P3. So characteristic and Z carry the same information. If two species have the same Frobenius characteristic, then they have the same Z, and if they have the same Z, they have the same characteristic. And what we shall see today is that we'll perform certain operations on species, and usually the effect on this generating function will be very easy, whereas these two are little harder, and this, it is actually this cycle index generating function and sometimes this Frobenius characteristic generating function that will really allow us to understand what is happening to this type generating function. So let's just go on to the operations on species. So there's a whole calculus of species. So by calculus, I just mean ways of doing calculation formally. You manipulate species as if they are symbols. So we have sum of species, and this is just f of u, disjoint union. I'll write plus for disjoint union. So an f plus g structure on u. So remember this language that they use. They say fu denotes an f structure on u. So yeah, some question?
All structures on you.
Sorry?
Is that all F structures on you?
Yeah, sorry, all f. Thank you. All f's. The set of all f structures. An element of fu is an f structure on you. So elements of fu are f structures on you. And so, for example, if f is a species of graphs, then fu is all graphs with vertices labeled by u. So when you say f plus gu, an f plus g structure is either an f structure on u or a g structure on u. And it's completely obvious here that all the counting will just be additive. So we'll have f of x plus f plus g of x will be f of x plus g of x z. So I probably don't even need to write these because they get derived from this one. So this is very easy, and more interesting is f times g of u. So an f times g structure on u is defined to be disjoint union. So when I say sum, I mean disjoint union. So the sum of sets is disjoint union. Sigma summation like this is a disjoint union too. And so what I'll be looking at is sets u1 plus u2, partitioning u into two parts, and then f of u1 cross G of U. I need to say, of course, what sigma also does. So F here, in this case, F plus G of sigma of X is equal to F sigma of X. If X, in all these cases, it's somewhat obvious, but let me just write it down. G sigma. If X belongs to Fu, and G sigma X. Right, so what is sigma? Sigma is a bijection, say, from some U to V. Then F sigma is from Fu to Gu, G sigma is from, no, Fu to Fv, and G sigma is from Gu to Gv. So this will go from F plus Gu to F plus G. Any questions?
So did you mean here U1 union U2 or plus?
Yeah, plus is disjoint union.
Okay.
So plus is always disjoint union. The notation just seems to be easy to write. And so this is the thing. And then again, you can define sigma. So if you have F dot G sigma, and so now you'll have two these things. You'll have alpha comma beta. So this alpha is an F structure on U1, beta is a G structure on U2. Then this will be I guess F sigma. So what you'll do is sigma restricted to U1, I guess. So we have sigma from U to V. So you'll have sigma will take U1 to some subset of V and U2 to some other subset of V. So sigma restricted to U1 and sigma restricted to U2 will also be arrows in the category FP. And I guess you'll have to take this. So you just transport the structure in a natural manner. Maybe this will look less scary if I just give you a few examples. So so let's look at the simplest example, which is let's ask what is so recall that let me just insert a new page here. How do I insert a page? Yeah. Okay. So let's just recall subspecies. So we have a very important species which is called the species E, and this is just the species of it's the E stands for ensemble. It just takes a set. U goes to singleton U as a set. So basically, you're saying there's no structure. So there are no cases for all. And this the generating functions for this, I don't think I calculated them last time. Let's just compute the ZE. So this is summation n greater than or equal to 0, 1 over n factorial, sigma and Sn. And then we have just one element and it's fixed by every permutation. So I don't put anything. Then I just have x1 raised to m1, x2 raised to m2, where mi is the number of I cycles in sigma. So then you can write this as summation n greater than or equal to 0, and then you can write sum over partitions of n, where alpha is the partition 1 raised to a1, 2 raised to a2, so on. That means, and then you have this, the number of elements with cycle type alpha is n factorial over the centralizer of alpha. So when you work that out, you'll get product I raised to AI, I raised to AI factorial. And then you will also get here, of course, because of this, you will get, you can write it as product xi raised to mi. This is I greater than or equal to 1. Okay, so I hope this, I did this a little quickly. What I did was I broke up Sn into its cycle types, the set of permutations, and for each cycle type, I have to take the number of elements of that cycle type. That is n factorial divided by product I raised to ai factorial, and then that n factorial cancel out, and so I'm left with this. And now you just forget about this n. You just take all ai. Yeah,
Change mi to ai. And
yeah. Sorry, ai. And so now you forget about this n. You just take, you're summing over all ai greater than or equal to 0, product I greater than or equal to 1, xi raised to I raised to ai factorial, and then by distributivity, this is product uh, I greater than or equal to 1, and then you have summation xi raised to ai by ai. So this is exponential of xi by I. Xi raised to ai by I raised to ai divided by ai factorial. So that's just xi by I to the power ai divided by ai factorial. So this is exponential, this sum. And that is then exponential of x1 plus x2 by 2 plus x3 by 3. Okay, so this is a standard sum that comes up when you study cycle index theory. And so let's just see for this product. There's a nice example. So let's.
Sir, I have one question. So,
Yeah.
Are we allowing infinite sums here? No, right?
We are allowing infinite sums.
No, in the third step, ai is bigger than 0. So all but finitely many ai's should be 0, right?
So
We are taking only finite sequences, no? Cycle types, they terminate.
yeah. So the point is that if you look at any monomial, then only finitely many AIs will contribute to it. So yeah, that's the answer to your question. We don't have to put any restriction on AI. This is a formal sum, so all we are interested in is what is the coefficient of each monomial. Okay, you have to be a little careful with formal sums. You have to make sure that you can add them and multiply them. All that is well defined, but you can check that it's all fine here.
What I meant was this first summation was running over ai greater than 0. So I think that is sequences of non-negative integers.
Yeah.
We expect those sequences to be eventually 0, right?
Okay, you're saying otherwise you will get these terms which don't even make any sense. Yeah, you're right. So yeah, otherwise you'll get these monomials of infinite degree, which doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're right. Good point. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at some very simple examples of this product construction. So let's just see what is E squared. So E squared U. So yeah, let's just use the definition. So this is summation U1 plus U2 equals U. And then we just have this set. Right? So it consists of, we can say it consists of all pairs u1 comma u2 such that u1 plus u2 is equal to. So this is actually, you can think of it as maybe subsets of, this is isomorphic to the species pu, where pu is the set of subsets of u. You just take u1 as your subset, u2 will automatically be its complement, it's completely determined. So this E2u is the species pu. And so that's maybe one more simple. Is this example clear?
Yes.
Okay, one more I'll do. The species of partitions. So this is the species of unordered partitions. By unordered, I mean the parts are not ordered. So you just you can think of this as equivalence relations on U, and this is no, maybe sorry, this is not what I wanted. This is an example of something else. I'll come to this later. So
Is that summation e power I?
so uh, the generating function, this will be Bell numbers. So this will be e to the, I'll explain this, e to the z minus 1. So this comes from substitution of species. Let's not discuss it. I'll just come back to this later. Yeah, here's another very standard example of a species product. S equals E times der. So S of u is all permutations of u, all permutations of u. So the action of Sn on this is by conjugation. We saw this last time. And der of u is derangements of u. That is permutations which are fixed point free. And why is this? So you have some permutation. So we will see it in some cycle notation. So maybe it has some 1 cycles, some 2 cycles, and some larger cycles like this. So then what you do is you separate out the 1 cycles from everything else. So I'll call this U1, I'll call this U2. And so what you're doing is you're just taking U1 as a set, nothing more to it. There's just one set structure on this. So you just say, okay, I'm separating out the 1 cycles, and then U2 is going to have all the larger cycles, and so it's going to be a derangement. So every permutation is of U is consists of a subset of U and a derangement of its complement in a unique manner. Is this clear?
Yes. So when you say equality, S equal to E cross D,
Yeah.
then do we mean they are naturally isomorphic?
Yes, they are naturally isomorphic functors.
Okay.
And that what is a natural isomorphism? It means that did I explain this last time? I mean, a natural isomorphism of functors means that for every means that for every u, you have a bijection eta u, fu to, this is natural isomorphism. And it reflects, it respects transport of structure. Okay, so this sort of intuitively somehow it's always clear in all these examples, but of course, you know, one needs to be careful here. This diagram commutes. So that's a natural isomorphism. And this, when I say equality, I always mean natural isomorphism. So same here, I wrote isomorphism, yeah, but it's maybe strictly speaking, I should say isomorphism, natural isomorphism of functors. So the, yeah, and visually it's just coming from this. Okay, so let's just see what are the generating functions and so on. So it turns out that the only thing I need to write here is that ZFG x1, x2 is ZF times ZF x1, x2 times ZG x1, x2. So that it is multiplicative. Yeah. So because of this, this implies that f times gx equals fx gx, and f tilde x g tilde x equals, sorry, f g tilde x equals f tilde x g tilde x. So this is not very difficult to prove. We can maybe I'll just you should try to do it. Basically, what you have to do. Okay, maybe I'll just show you the proof. Might as well show it to you. So we took ZFG x1, x2. Let's calculate this. So yeah, so we have sigma belongs to Sn, and now we have Fg, and then we have n sigma, and then x1 raised to m1, x2 raised to m2, where mi is the number of I cycles in sigma. So now this, if we expand, what we'll get is sum over all possible and then we'll have f u1 cross g u2, and then we have to take the sigma invariance of this, and then we have to take this. Now if now the point is that this should not depend on what u1 and u2 are, but only on this cardinality of u1 and the cardinality of u2. So we can replace this by maybe n1 plus n2 equals n factorial divided by n1 factorial, n2 factorial, and then we have f n1 cross g n2, and then we have to take sigma. Maybe here I should take sigma in Sn, and then yeah, this. Okay, so now this cancels off here, and so I get sum over n1 greater than or equal to 0, n2 greater than or equal to 0, and n is automatically n1 plus n2. I don't need to write this. But now, suppose you have a permutation sigma which preserves Fn1 cross Gn2, then that means that sigma actually is in Sn1 cross Sn2, the subgroup of Sn1 of n. So what we are doing is we're taking sigma 1 belongs to Sn1 Fn1, maybe I'll write it. Then also we have sigma 2 belongs to Sn2. And then we have Fn1 cross Gn2 invariants under sigma 1 comma sigma 2. So this will be again multiplicative. And then the number of cycles in sigma 1 comma sigma 2 will be the sum of the cycles in this thing. So x1 m1 sigma 1 plus m. And so then this is just the product of.
Why this in this step n1 plus n2 equal to n? Why this is automatic?
N1 plus N2 is n is equal to N1 plus N2. That's all. You don't need to keep track of n. N1 plus N2 will be something. So the sum is the same.
Oh, okay.
So that's it. And once you prove this, all the others will follow. But I think it's nice to just try to prove this thing directly. Fgx is fxgx because it's a very nice. I mean, it just shows how exponential generating functions work. So that's so these are the two elementary operations. And now you get something very interesting with this example. So let's look at this example again. So what we get is which allows us to compute z of derangements from zs and ze. So let's just do this. And so let me remind you about the calculation we did last time of z of. By the way, I should also say that this is also true for Frobenius characteristics. So. Yeah, that's just equivalent to this identity. So yeah, and we'll be looking at that also in this question. So remember that ZS this we had calculated last time, and it was product I greater than or equal to 1 over 1 minus x. It had this very beautiful form. And so what we get is Z and ZE is, of course, we just calculated it. And so what we get is Z of there is exponential inverse okay, this is not a big deal. Okay, maybe it's a big deal, but it's not it seems like something complicated. But let's look at let's just look at what happens when we look at der x. So let's compute the number of derangements of x of n. So this is going to be so E of x is what? It's just 1 over E of x is e to the x. Okay, because it's just the generating function of the exponential generating function of series 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So this is going to be e to the minus x, and then we have the generating function for permutations, which is 1 minus x. Okay, so what this implies is that n factorial. So this turns out to be 1 factorial plus 1 factorial. Alternating sum of factorials truncated at right, because this is this is so if you want the coefficient of x to the n here in this product, you will be summing the coefficients up to power n. And so this is the operation. Multiplication by this is like taking partial sums of this. So this is a famous formula, and you know that hat problem where 100 people go to a party and then they all come back. They check in their hats at the reception, and then when they come out, they all get hats at random. What is the probability that nobody gets back their own hat? And this goes to e inverse as n goes to infinity. So this is the famous, it's called the hat problem, I guess. Probably in an Indian context, it's more like the chappal problem. Everybody goes to the temple and leaves their chappals outside. And it often happens that nobody gets back their chappal. Okay, so any questions? I'm missing n factorial there. Not missing n factorial. No, this is the exponential generating function of S. And this is the exponential generating function of E. Because S has n factorial entries in the nth term. Is that what you're talking about, Narayanan? This is EX, this is, or rather EX inverse, and this is SX. Okay, I hope everything is clear. Yeah, but it's also fun to play with the Frobenius characteristics of these things. So what? Yeah.
He says this cardinality should be an integer.
Oh yeah. Right. Good point. I was looking at the probability. Yeah. So yeah. So what I should say is probability of derangement is. Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. After taking the coefficient, I should multiply it by n factorial. Thanks. Okay, so that's so very simple and elegant proof. I want to do some Frobenius characteristic also. So remember, what was the Frobenius characteristic of S? This was summation over all partitions alpha p alpha. We had computed this last time. You can also get it from this. So actually what we had got is probably product. Yeah, so this comes straight away. I greater than or equal to 1, 1 over 1 minus pi. And so this is 1 plus p1 squared, then 1 plus p2 squared, and so on. So it's all possible, monomials in the pi. So, so summation alpha p alpha, and let's compute the Frobenius characteristic of E. So this is p1 plus p2 by 2 plus dot dot dot. And so let's remember that pi is t1 raised to I plus t2 raised to I. So this is a symmetric function. If you want, you can take a large number of variables, or you can just kind of formally do it in infinitely many variables. So pi is t1 to the I plus t2 to the I plus 1. So what we get is exponential t1 plus t2 plus dot dot dot. Then we get plus t1 squared by 2 plus t2 squared by 2 plus dot 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 plus t1 cubed by 3 plus t2 cubed by 3 plus dot dot dot, and so on. And so what we get is exponential, and then we get summation. For each I we get t1 plus t1 squared by 2 plus so on. So we get log of 1 over 1 minus ti. But that is the same as so now I can take it out, and I get product exponential of log of 1 over 1 minus ti, which is 1 over 1 minus ti. So what this is the generating function for complete symmetric functions. So this is H0. So the homogeneous parts of this expansion are called the complete symmetric functions, H1, H2, H3. So HD is just taking all possible monomials of degree D, each one exactly once, and that gives HD. So this is, so usually this sum is denoted by capital H. So this sum is denoted by capital H. So what we have is characteristic of S is equal to summation alpha p alpha. Characteristic of E is H. And what we know is that characteristic of derangements is the inverse of H times this characteristic of S. So let's work out what the inverse of H is. So H is this. So H inverse is product of 1 minus Ti. And this turns out to be E0 minus E1 plus E2. This is the alternating sum of elementary symmetric functions. And so these are where only monomials where each variable occurs with power 0 or 1. You add all of them up. That's ED, all degree D monomials. So I guess, let me write this out. HD is I1 less than or equal to I2 less than or equal to ID, TI1, TI2, TID, and ED is I1 less than I2 less than. So these are mutual inverses. So what we get is HE is equal to, so we'll call this, though sometimes it's called E of minus 1. So anyway, so this is E and that's H, and they are inverses. So what we get is that the Frobenius characteristic of derangements is E times the Frobenius characteristic of permutations. And so let's now try to expand this in terms of Schur functions. So what we know is that, so recall, P alpha, the power sum symmetric function P alpha. So that is if alpha is the partition with A1 ones, A2 twos, and so on, then this is P1 raised to the power A1, P2 to the power 2, and so on. So this is given by sum over lambda partition of alpha of the size of alpha chi lambda. So this is times S lambda. Yeah. So this is a result from the theory of symmetric functions. Okay, that the expansion of power sum symmetric functions in the basis of Schur functions is given by the character values of lambda of the symmetric group, and it's the coefficients are in fact coming from a column of the character table. Alpha is fixed. So now last time what we had done is we had got some positivity. So now because this thing is a true representation, this when we compute its Frobenius characteristic and take its Schur expansion, it has to be Schur positive. So let's see what that condition gives. So let's just compute this. So this is E times summation alpha P alpha, which is E times summation alpha summation lambda same size as alpha, and then we have chi lambda alpha S lambda. But now let's interchange the order of summation here, and what we get is E times summation lambda S lambda times summation alpha having the same size as lambda chi lambda alpha. So what we get here is a row in the character, the sum of a row in the character table. But then we have also this business. So now the Peary rule says that Ek S lambda, maybe I'll write it somewhere. Here. Mu minus lambda is a vertical strip. That means lambda is a Young diagram, mu is another Young diagram, which contains lambda, and each row of mu has at most one box that is not in lambda. That's what it means to be a horizontal strip of length k. That means the k boxes in mu which are not in lambda S mu. So that's Peary rule for E. So if you now apply that, then what you get is this is summation over lambda, then summation over mu minus lambda, and I'll just write Vs to indicate is a vertical strip. Then because of this sign in the east, this is minus 1 raised to the size of mu minus the size of lambda, and then S mu, and then we still have alpha partition of the size of lambda chi lambda alpha. And now if you take the mu out, you get this, and maybe I can move this Peary business. Out of this. Okay, so this is S mu, and what is the coefficient of S mu? It's summation mu minus lambda is a vertical strip, And then we get minus 1 raised to mu minus lambda. And then we get summation alpha partition of lambda chi lambda. This sum here is very similar to something that occurs in a formula for the character polynomial of a Specht module. Those of you who have seen those things, there's a binomial coefficient here in that formula, but it's very similar sum. So it's very intriguing that these things have to be greater than or equal to 0. So what we're saying is that for every partition mu, the side sum is greater than or equal to 0, just because we computed the Frobenius characteristic of a true representation of Sn, so it has to be sure positive. And let's look at some special cases. So I just looked at two simple special cases, not very exciting, but okay, at least the second one is slightly exciting. But this one is kind of, what is it saying? So if you take mu to be the partition with one part, which is n, the only way you can remove a vertical strip from n is by removing one box from it. So the sum has two elements, n and n minus 1. And what you get is Pn minus 1 is greater than, if you work it out, because let's see, why do I say this? Because you'll be taking the trivial character and you'll be taking its sum along all conjugacy classes. There are Pn conjugacy classes for n, and there are Pn minus 1 conjugacy classes for n minus 1. So this gives the monotonicity of the partition functions. And the second special case, this is a little more cute, but also not a very difficult identity to prove, but it's a little more surprising. So if you take mu to be 1 to the n, then lambda can be 1 to the k for any k less than or equal to n. So what you get is summation k goes from 0 to n. Then self-conjugate partitions of n minus k minus 1 raised to k, which is saying that if you take the alternating sum of self-conjugate partitions, then that alternating sum is non-negative. So you can try to prove this, give a combinatorial proof of this. So self-conjugate partitions of n minus self-conjugate partitions of n minus 1 plus self-conjugate partitions of n minus 2 and so on.
So do this non-negative things is actually an integer, positive integer?
I don't know if it's positive, it's a non-negative integer.
Integer, right?
Of course it's an integer, because the multiplicity of an irreducible representation has to be an integer.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
And of course it's also an integer because everything here, these are all, I suppose, what are we doing? I forgot what we're doing. Anyway.
You can't take on the expression, right? Character value.
No, but these are symmetric functions, and Schur functions form an integer basis, right, for symmetric functions. So if you have a symmetric function with integer coefficients, then in its Schur expansion will have integer coefficients. So I think integrality is not an issue.
Okay.
Though I think if you take power sum symmetric functions, they won't have integer coefficients. That is not an integer basis, but Schur functions are an integer basis because Schur functions from monomial symmetric functions are related using Kostka numbers, which is a triangular, unitriangular transformation. So that's a nice example of products. Okay, how much time can I take? Can I take a little more time? Because I didn't even get to substitution and differentiation, which are the most important.
I have no problem.
Okay, I'll take half an hour more.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's get to. So this is some fun, random fun with products, and there's more interesting slightly. So substitution. This is a little harder to understand, but we'll get used to it anyway. So let me just define it. The operation, it's kind of designed to, so if you try to find, if you have two species f and g and you try to find a species such that its exponential generating function is f of g of x, then you will actually be led to this definition. So that, let me say that at the very outset. When you try to compose two exponential generating functions, the coefficients turn out to have a certain relationship. And you will be led to this definition. So from that point of view, this definition is very natural. But I will not go into that because it will just take some time. But here's the definition itself. And maybe once I give the definition, you'll see that it's the natural thing. So, right. So F circle G is the species. It is not a composition of functors. That's an important point. So this is, okay, maybe I should talk about, okay, so you remember the species partitions, right? So par of U is, let me just explain here, par of U is all equivalence relations on U or all partitions of U into set partitions of U. Unordered, so the parts don't have any order. So, so are all equivalence relations. And the cardinality of par of n is what is called the Bell number. So that's what I'm talking about when I say par. So this is defined to be disjoint union over all partitions of U. So basically I've taken U and I've chopped it up into pieces. So visually you can describe it like this. You have this set U. This is U. And then what I've done is I have chopped it up into pieces. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to put an F structure on the set of pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an F structure on this whole set of pieces. And then I'm going to also put a G structure on each piece. So let's call these pieces, so we'll put a G structure on each piece. So that's the visualization. And so the formal definition is product over V belongs to pi G. So that's the definition. And it's good to have an example here. And this is where the example I was talking about. So examples.
There is one question on the chat.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thanks for. you put G structure. See, these F structure and G structures are independent. So you fix a partition of your set U, and on each part you put a G structure, and independently of that you put an F structure on the set of all parts. That's all. So it's there's no these are two independent things. Maybe example will help. So example is par itself. Okay, so let me tell you these French, they have lovely names for everything. And so this is called an F assembly of G structures. So an element of F circle GU is an F assembly of G structures. And maybe the most instructive examples, probably I should do first. Okay. So special case, let's take E circle G of U. So E is just the set, so it's just called an assembly of G structures. So what you're doing is you're just dividing, there's nothing here, it's just a singleton. And what you're doing is you're just dividing your set into subsets, and you're putting a G structure on each subset. So for example, recall that G denotes the species of all graphs. That is, GU is graphs whose vertices are labeled by U. And G0 maybe denotes the species of all connected graphs. Then G is an assembly of connected graphs. So a graph is an assembly of connected graphs. That is, you take the vertex set, divide it into subsets, and then you just put a connected graph structure on each subset. And that's the same as putting a graph structure on the entire vertex set. So in fact, in general, if F is equal to E circle F naught, then the elements of F naught are called connected components of the F structure. Then F naught is called the category of connected F structures. It's called the species of connected F structures. So this is just an abstraction. Of course, sometimes it may make no sense for what it means to be connected F structure. Called, well, I think, I'm not sure these are unique. So this, yeah.
I have a question. Why can't we look at E as a Cartesian product of its connected component?
Because in the Cartesian product, you have order.
Order on?
Order on the components.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, I need to make a very important caveat here. So the other thing is we need that G of empty set. So usually for this to make sense in general, we will need assume that G of the empty set is empty. So
So are these labeled species?
species are always labeled.
Then there should be an order on the components, right? You can give the order of the minimum, arrange them ascending by the minimum.
So the F structure is labeled by the parts of the partition. There's no order on them. Ordering is not the same as labeling. Labeling by an ordered set is an ordering, but labeling by a set is not an ordering. So the F structure is labeled by the parts of the partition pi.
Okay.
So yeah, this is a very important point. So if you look at this example, for instance, there's no, when you take graphs, this is a prototypical example. You take a graph, there's no ordering on the connected components, right? I mean, the graph has a canonical partition into its connected components, but there's no canonical ordering on those components. I mean, you could impose one by bringing up certain criteria, but as such, there is no such thing. For a general set U, of course, if U is an ordered set and so on, then all kinds of things can happen, but we don't, this whole thing is independent of the ordering on U, because they're allowing all invariance under all permutations of U. So we don't have that. And the other important example of composition of species is, it's a very interesting example, is what is the connected component of a permutation? Yes? I have a picture here.
Cycle structure, right?
Yes, it's a cycle, right? So you can think of a permutation as a graph where every node has as a directed graph, directed simple graph with loops, where every node has one in arrow and one out arrow. And so you can think of cycles as the, yeah, exactly. So if we just make that observation formal, all kinds of amazing things happen. So this is the species of cycles. Okay, but I didn't tell you how to manipulate the the generating functions, and that in this case is rather more complicated. So let's talk about that. So where's the definition? Yeah, here's the definition. So what we will say is, so this one is easy. F circle G of X is F of G of X. But this thing turns out to be quite a bit more complicated. So what it is, so now I have x1, x2, not just x. So let me write out in full form. So you take ZF, and then for the variable x1, you substitute g of x1, x2, and so on. For the variable x2, you substitute g of x2, x4, and so on. For the variable x3, you substitute g of x3, x6, and so on. And so on. And this is some sort of operation on these kinds of formal generating functions. Okay, this operation makes sense. I guess, yeah, right. Okay, so I think this operation definitely makes sense if G has no degree 0 term, but yeah. So, but this is what is called plethism. So this is called ZF circle ZG. So let me explain this thing a bit more carefully. Some of you have seen plethism of symmetric functions, and this is closely related to that. So So what we are saying is f circle G of x1, x2. We want to make sense of this.
Inside is that is ZG of x1, x2.
Yeah, sorry. And from this you can calculate f tilde. So this will turn out to be f tilde. No, this will turn out to be ZG. You can't simplify it much more. ZF G tilde of x, G tilde of x squared, tilde of x cubed, and so on. Okay, so this is what we are saying, right? Independent of whether these are generating functions or something, we want to understand this kind of symbolism. So let's call this some sort of, so there's this operation called circle, which is called plethistic substitution, and let's just make some observations. So if we take f to be just xk, then f circle G is, so we have to take the kth variable here, right? So it will just be G of xk, x2k, x3k, and so on. That's what this definition says, that xk circle G is G of xk, x2k, x. And similarly, G circle xk. So what does you mean? That you're just putting f of, so that is G of, and then you're putting xk here. Here you're putting xk squared, not xk squared, sorry, x2k, x3k. So what you have is that xk circle G and G circle xk are equal. So the first thing is xk circle G equals G circle xk for all k and for all G. The second is xk circle xl. Okay, so this is, what is this going to be? So it is just x, so you're going to take the lth coordinate of this, and so that just means that you get xkl for all kl greater than or equal to c, a1, I guess. That's the second rule. And the third rule is somewhat obvious. It is that, so because here now f is occurring on the outside, this is an algebra homomorphism in the argument f. So f goes to f circle G is an algebra homomorphism. That means it respects sums and products for every G. So these are the three rules which and these three rules completely determine this plethistic substitution. These are determine plethistic substitution. These rules completely determine this operation of circle. And if you just replace xk by pk, and do this thing on symmetric functions, then you get an operation that was defined by Littlewood called Plethism. And this would be familiar to those of you who work in algebraic combinatorics. This is Littlewood's Platheism operation. And this is so what we can also say is that the Frobenius characteristic of F circle G is the Frobenius characteristic of F plethistic product with the Frobenius characteristic of G. So that's also there. And okay, so yeah, and in fact this one turns out to be for me easier to prove, and it's enough to prove this in order to prove this they are equivalent, because as I pointed out, the Frobenius characteristic determines the what do I call it, cycle index generating function. So since the Frobenius characteristic determines the cycle index generating function, it turns out that it's enough to prove this. And the proof of this corresponds to a result in representation theory, which says that the Frobenius characteristic of a certain, you have a representation of Sm, you have a representation of Sn, you use it to construct a representation of Sm Reith Sn, and you induce that to S of m times n, then its Frobenius characteristic is a Plethism for homogeneous functions. So in the case where, so somehow it corresponds to that. So using the representation theory of symmetric groups. So in the book, they postpone this proof to chapter 4, and I will also not get into the proof right now, but I feel that this is one way to think of the proof. In the book, they do something similar, but not in this language. So it seems they do use power sum symmetric functions, some Polya theory kind of thing, and prove this. But the proof is not as easy as the proofs for sums and products. So this is much more complicated than the earlier things. But yeah.
I just had one. Is there a Reith product operation on species?
No, but this substitution of species is like the Reith product. In terms of permutation representations, it's like this induction from the Reith product.
Right. But there's Reith products on graphs and stuff. So
oh, really? Then there may be some Reith product on species.
Yeah. I'm not aware. But for graphs, I remember reading about it.
So maybe I'll do one, maybe you can tell me about it later. Anyway, we need to meet and discuss something. So, so let me just, yeah. So here's one thing. So I don't know. Let's play with this. So what does this say? So what this says is that ZS is exponential of summation k greater than or equal to 1 xk circle. Now I'm using that this maybe, yeah, this is also ZF x1 circle ZG x2 circle ZG. That's what it is, right? This is just xi circle ZG means that you replace the jth variable of this by the ijth variable, by the variable xi. So xk circle z c divided by k, that's what I get, because for E it is summation xk by k. But this we know is product I greater than or equal to 1 over 1 minus xi. You take logs. This is an exercise in the book actually. I really loved it. So you get summation log of 1 over 1 minus xi is equal to summation k greater than or equal to 1 xk circle zc by k. Now there's a general lemma for dealing with this kind of stuff. And so we can resolve this whole thing and compute zc from zs. So the lemma is, suppose a and b are two functions, a x1, x2, and b x1, x2 are such that we have b is equal to summation 1 over k xk circle a, and then this is equivalent to, maybe I should rephrase this, for all such formal series, this is the same as, so this is a kind of a Mobius inversion formula. So that's, and that will certainly apply to this situation. This is where A is, B is summation log of 1 over 1 minus xi. So, yeah. Yeah, I think that's correct. So the proof is not very difficult. So proof just, this is the Mobius function of number theory. It's it's 0 for all square free integers, and it's multiplicative, and it's what, it's plus or minus 1. So for yeah, so for each prime it's minus 1, I guess. Am I right, Narayanan? Anyway, I'll assume I'm right. So important point is not what its values are, but the important point is how it sums. So okay, so let's just prove this. So suppose LHS holds. Then I can just write summation mu k by k xk circle b is when summation k greater than or equal to 1 mu k by k, and then what we have is summation L greater than or equal to 1, and then we have xk circle b, and then we have xl. So I'm just going to substitute this value of b. So 1 over L xkl circle A, just because I have xk circle xl circle A. And so now if you look at the coefficient of xn circle A, then this is sum over k divides n, and then you have mu k by k, k by n, L is n by k, and but then this is just this is just A1, because summation of mu k over k divides n is, this is the defining property of mu k, is 1 unless n is equal to 1. So this is just A1. A1 as in X1 circle. So the proof is just like this, and you can prove the other way also using this. So it's basically Mobius inversion application. And so what this means is that one minus x dk. And now if you compute, if you try to find the coefficient of, if you compute the coefficient of 1 minus xn, then again you can write this as summation n greater than or equal to 1, and then you will have summation d divides n. So that's your k, I guess, and then, or maybe I'll make that n by k, so I'll get mu n by d, and then k would be n by d, so I'll write this as d, and then I will get this times log of 1 over 1 minus xn. But this is just the Euler-Tauschent function by Mobius inversion. So you know that summation d divides n phi d is n. So you get that this is n greater than or equal to 1 phi n by n log of. So you can use this kind of arithmetic inversion to compute the cycle index generating function for the species of cycles. And I haven't really been able to get a very nice expression for the Frobenius characteristic. I mean, it doesn't simplify much more than this, except, instead of here xn, I will put p subscript n. I haven't really got any very exciting things. But this is this kind of argument works in many cases. We use two features. One is that we are taking E circle something, and so that was enough to kind of get this. But then the second part of the Euler-Tauschent also used the fact that the thing whose connected components we are taking, it has a generating function which is an exponent of a sum which has a product. It has a product expansion like this, one factor for each variable. So whenever you have such a factorization for S, you will get, for any species, you will get a similar expression for the species of its connected components. Okay, so that was probably a bit intense, but we will stop there. Questions?
Is there any, the same way you have exponential generating function, also ordinary generating function. So is there any, like, I guess, natural transformation between the two things?
Yeah, I didn't understand the question. So using the species, it doesn't give you an expression for the ordinary generating function for counting the number of F structures.
The species is for exponential generating.
Yeah, exactly.
But there is a parallel theory for ordinary also, I think.
Well, I don't know if the theory for ordinary generating functions is as nice. there's just this theory of combinatorial objects, right? So you can do products, you can there's some operations you can do. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe we should look at that and see, contrast these two theories. I think this composition, substitution is a really powerful operation. Oh, never got to differentiation. Okay, that I'll do next time. The substitution is a very powerful operation, and this theorem, which gives the cycle index for the substitution, is quite a strong result. Right? There's really no other way, for example, to compute f circle g tilde, the type generating function. So it does seem to give a lot of strong results there. But in another sense, this is what is called a categorification of many identities involving functions. You have, you have functional equations, you have differential equations. All these things become categorified in the sense that they are expressed now in terms of natural isomorphisms of various functors. Okay, I'll stop the recording.